Hi gang, John O'Brien here, your video professor. As noted, our course will turn to an online modality until further notice as we deal locally, nationally, and internationally with the COVID-19 pandemic. So in the news today, or on Sunday at any rate, Federal Reserve slashing interest rates to try to keep the economy humming as much of it shuts down. Hopefully you will not shut down. We will be delivering this lesson and the others. I'll post them every Monday morning, Wednesday morning, Friday morning for the Monday, Wednesday, Friday people. Please leave your comments in the YouTube comment section if you have questions. I'll look at the questions regarding today's lesson next time and answer them in this format. Also, please engage with Blackboard. Blackboard discussion is how I will take attendance. So get into Blackboard. I will post the link there. I realize most of you have not used Blackboard discussion for at least my classes, but get in there, I'll post some questions, answer them, interact with each other. That's how attendance will be taken. Please also note the revised syllabus. So we've taken 2 tests already. We have 2 exams yet to complete. They will be obviously done online and in a totally essay format. I realize that's probably too fuzzy for you to read on the screen, but it is posted in our content section on Blackboard. So please check those out. Last time we were together, we were discussing Rome. And we noted that Rome had 1,000 years of history. Rome, millennium from 509 BCE to 476 of the Common Era. Let's just do it this way. Not totally set up here. My technology, not exactly where I want it to be yet, but this is a dry run. Well, that's interesting. Okay, here we go. Mediterranean side of the Roman phase. We talked about Rome, 1,000 years of history under a republic, Respublica, representative of the republic for about the first 500 years. Following a period of political demise, assassination, civil war, politicians with their own armies, we see the demise of the republic itself and the ascension of power of Augustus. Real name was Octavian. He was Julius Caesar's nephew, named to be his son in Caesar's last will and testament. So to get Caesar's title and all of his power, he formed with 2 other guys, both named Marcus Lepidus and Mark Antony, to form the second triumvirate. That didn't have any luck, as the first triumvirate did not have luck either. The 3 began to fight. Mark Antony teamed up, so to speak, with Cleopatra in Egypt, and they were defeated by Augustus, who came to govern the entire Mediterranean. So, mythic origins there, Virgil's Aeneid, right, the founding of Rome by Romulus of Romulus and Remus fame. In reality, the early Romans were Indo-Europeans who moved into the Italian peninsula to intermingle with the people already there, including the Etruscans, who ruled them until 509 BCE, whereupon they were overthrown by the Romans, overthrowing a foreign king and forming a senate as a result. They would be influential to the founders of the United States much later on, who also overthrew a foreign king. Class conflict between the wealthy patrician landowners and the plebeians, the common people, would ensue for about 2 centuries on and off in a very pragmatic way. The plebeians, or the poorer people, tended to go on strike, not grow the food, not deliver it, and not serve in Rome's armies. That was important, that the plebeians were pragmatic, because the patricians would give in a little bit at a time. They would allow the plebeians to sit in the Senate as tribunes. They would publish the law for the plebeians. They gave them greater rights pragmatically and over a long period of time, because they needed the plebeians to serve in the legions of Rome. Rome was at war. To the north, conquering the rest of the Etruscans, to the south, conquering the Greeks. And they came upon the island between Italy and North Africa, Sicily. Sicily, strategic. The Romans will go to war along with their allies. Remember, they had extended citizenship rights to powerful people on the Italian peninsula. They would go to war against Carthage, which was the grandchildren, so to speak, of our friends the Phoenicians, the alphabet people. Right? Carthaginians and Romans will go to war with one another over the island of Sicily. The Romans win First Punic War, the Second Punic War, the Third Punic War, which really was just showing the Roman arrogance by that time, because the Romans, by legend, sowed salt into the lands of Carthage to show that land would never be productive again. In that Second Punic War, Hannibal brought his elephants and troops across the Straits of Gibraltar, over the Alps and into Italy, but the alliances held, and Hannibal was called back. He was defeated at the Battle of Zama in 202 BCE. That was the Second Punic War. Third Punic War, not that important, just showed the weakness of Carthage. It also showed the maybe changing character of the Romans, who had at one time been rather conservative and rough, pragmatic, had become maybe selfish, especially the senatorial class that benefited from all this new land and all the captured people working it as slaves. The Roman soldier became poorer. The Roman soldier came home after 20 years of fighting people like Hannibal. His farm was in shambles. He sold out his land to the wealthy patricians who grew these tremendously large plantations called latifundia. Maybe the farmer was forced out and found himself to be a member of a poor urban city underclass. Much of the productive work in the cities, construction, for example, was also being done by slaves. So this formerly independent farmer soldier became part of the grass urban underclass. Essentially what happened was Roman politicians hired these guys, right? You can be a soldier. Well, no, I couldn't. If I don't own land, I can't be a soldier. Well, it didn't matter in the eyes of Sulla or Marius or others who would recruit these veterans to form their own personal private armies. We saw in class on Friday Mustafa Kemal from Iraq talking about politicians with their own militias. This was something similar, right? And Rome was embroiled in civil war. Ultimately, yes, the Gracchi brothers had promised land reform. They're killed in 133 BCE. We get ultimately the first triumvirate, Julius Caesar and two other guys, Lepidus and Crassus, who teamed up. Caesar was gaining fame by conquering the rather tribal people. The Romans called it barbarian, which means you can't read or write or live in cities. The Gaulish people in France, what we now call France, were conquered. And Caesar was gaining fame with the people, though especially the poor people of Rome. It scared the other two guys. Okay? Lepidus and Crassus were afraid, and they said, Caesar, come home, leave your troops up there in Gaul, or we would say France. And Caesar gets to the river, kind of separating Italy from France, near the Alps, called the Rubicon, just a small creek. And he says, the die is cast, and he goes through with his troops. Now he's a traitor, and he hunts down one of the two, I can't remember who. I think Lepidus. Crassus was killed in battle in the east against the Sassanid Persians. So Julius Caesar stands alone, and he says, I'm going to be dictator for 10 years. I need to make reforms. A police brigade, a fire brigade, public works for the poor. And then he decides to be dictator for life, which essentially is an emperor, right? You can't have an emperor and a republic. He's stabbed to death on the Ides of March. March 15th of the year 44 BCE. Rome had outgrown its city-state constitution. The type of government Rome had when it was just Rome, the city of Rome, that worked. 100 senators or so serving for life terms, bestowing it to their eldest sons. That kind of worked as long as they were rather selfless. But in time, Rome grew to be a world state, and that old city-state constitution no longer worked. This is where we left off last time. We'll pick up now, and I'll slow down a bit, with the rise of Augustus. Augustus was Caesar's nephew, or grandnephew, 19 years old, studying in Greece. Upon hearing of his uncle's death, he rushes home. He comes to find that he, Augustus, real name Octavian, had been named as Caesar's son and was granted all his power and titles and money. Augustus here teams up with two other guys, as I said in the outset, Mark and Marcus. They form the second triumvirate, and it doesn't work. It doesn't work. Marcus ends up in jail. Mark Antony, as we said, teamed up with Cleopatra at the Battle of Actium. They are defeated. Cleopatra supposedly commits suicide with the horrible asp, all right, the snake bite. So what happens? Augustus is the only man standing, except for this little guy right here. We don't know who he is, but he's the last man standing. Actually, this is just an element of statuary. You can't have all the weight of this heavy marble on one thin ankle, so they had to make the ankle thicker by sticking a little cupid in there. Anyway, Augustus becomes Emperor of Rome, although he never claims that title. He's commander-in-chief, he's the head of the state religion called Pontifex Maximus. Someone else has that title today, by the way. He has all the important titles. It would be as if in the United States, one person was president and vice president and Senate Majority Leader and House Speaker and Supreme Court Chief Justice and Jeff Bezos and all these important titles. He had all real power. But he was wise enough not to call himself dictator for life or emperor. Not that he had to fear assassination that much. All of the conspirators who had killed his uncle had been hunted down and killed. But Augustus stands alone. And in some ways, though Democrat as I am, I'm going to say that Augustus solves the problems of the empire. He institutes something called the Pax Romana, the Roman peace, for 200 years. Or 207 years, okay? There's peace within the empire. Within the empire. On the outskirts of the empire, there's fighting, okay? Rome keeps expanding. This is a negative image, right? North Africa, Spain, the Iberian Peninsula, I should say. Gaul, Britain, okay? Moving through southern Europe, Eastern Europe, and even the Middle East. Pushing against the Persians, pushing against the so-called barbarians. Again, that was a Roman term for people who didn't have writing, didn't live in cities, although actually some of them did. I guess it's more politically correct to call them the Germanic peoples. Okay? Rome kept expanding. It grew in size. And cities were established in this direction, bringing Greek and Roman culture into Western Europe to form a foundation for Western civilization still today. When we look back to the Romans for law, right, legal concepts, all citizens equal under the law. For the Romans, the catch was not everyone's a citizen. Right? Language, not many of us speak Latin anymore, but we do see it in medical terminology. We see it in the history of the Catholic Church. We see it in legal discourse as well. Government, the fact that the United States has a Senate. When the founders of this nation overthrew a foreign king, so to speak, George III, they decided not to have a monarchy, but to have government by rich men. Okay, well, there you go. At least the Senate was half of the U.S. Congress, right? It's the senatorial branch, the more conservative branch of serving 6 terms each. Okay. All right. What else? The Romans were great road builders, right? So they'll link this empire by roads. There's also a postal system. We know someone else thought of that before. The Romans kind of copied it. The roads are actually all the same width, so you can move your armies almost anywhere. There's trade throughout the empire. It becomes one huge free trade zone, right? Roman coins, Roman law, Roman protection throughout, and also a diffusion of belief. Different beliefs can move along the Mediterranean and these Roman roads to become planted within the empire itself. Right, so a better image here of some of the Roman roads. Right? Roman Empire, at its greatest extent when circa, that's a Roman word, our Latin word, 300 of the Common Era, so 1700 years ago, pushing into Britain. Oh, they don't quite get into Scotland, and I will tell you, here we are close to St. Patrick's Day. They didn't get into Ireland either, but that's another story. A little bit too far for them. They started to get overextended. They did push into the Parthian Empire, fighting the Persian people, pushing for a while into Mesopotamia, and the Mediterranean became Mare Nostrum, right? Our sea. What beliefs were diffused, spread? Well, the old Roman religion spreads, right? Jupiter and all the cast of characters, the Greeks with different names, right? It also came to be believed that the emperor himself was divine. At least in parts of the empire, the Roman emperor was seen as divine. New ideas also began to filter into the empire, especially from the Hellenistic kingdoms, right? These old Hellenistic ideas of Greek rationalism. Hello, there's my dog, my assistant. Yes, of course. All professors' pets are going to become famous during this online session. Okay, this is Ani, her name. All right, so thank you, Ani. Thank you very much. Okay. Greek rationalism, Stoicism. If you recall, Stoicism was take things as they are. When your dog walks in your lecture, so be it, right? When bad things happen, when COVID-19 shuts down the schools, so be it. When the sun comes out and all the snow melts, so be it, right? Just to take life as fate, right? So that became a major philosophy within the Roman Empire. In fact, Marcus Aurelius, one of the good emperors, was in fact a Stoic philosopher. He had a book called Meditations that he wrote. And the first page says something like, look, today bad things are going to happen to me. People are going to say bad things about me. People are going to complain about whatever, okay? This is the script I've been given, right? We're all actors in this divine play. We don't get to rewrite the script. The best we can do is to do our best parts. New religions as well. If philosophy didn't appeal to you, too rational, you might adhere to some of the new religions. If you recall, in the Persian Empire, a religion arose there perhaps 2,600 years ago called Zoroastrianism. And if you recall, Ahura Mazda and the devil are locked in cosmic battle for thousands of years. Ultimately, Ahura Mazda, the good god's going to win, right? And all of his followers, the people who had good thoughts, good words, good deeds, will go to paradise. And the bad people, sorry, you're going to hell, right? Well, there's an offshoot of that, if I can call it Zoroastrianism 2.0, called Mithraism. And in this belief, we come to find out that Ahura Mazda has a general in his army. So here was a man who had fought on the side of good and died, was resurrected, and would promise salvation, paradise to any man who would follow him. So this became an important faith, especially among Roman soldiers in the East. Like, hey, here was a guy, died and came back to life. I'm going to go to heaven if I join this community of the believers. And actually, it included a lot of hazing rituals, a lot of baptism on earth to become part of this community of men. It was only for men. Here's an image here of Mithras slaying the bull of evil. All right, so that is an important image of a faith that competed with Christianity. Right? The belief was that the birth of Mithras was December 25th. And Mithraism and Christianity, as two young faiths, competed with each other really for adherence, for believers. And in fact, below some of the oldest churches in Italy, you find these kind of Mithraean altars of Mithras. When Mithraism was replaced by Christianity, the people just were used to going to the same place to worship. They built over these temples of Mithras. So pretty interesting. Oh, by the way, December 25th, what does that mean? Look, that was a holiday or a time of the year almost everybody celebrated, right? They had no atomic clocks 2,000 years ago, but they did realize that days started to get longer right around December 25th. Yes, there were a couple days off, the winter solstice, but here comes the sun, right? The days are getting longer, so there's hope, right? The dark times are over. Another important early religion of salvation was the cult of Isis. This is not the Islamic State in Iraq and Syria. No, that's a different ISIS, and those guys would be really mad if they realized that ISIS also is the name of this cult for a female, right, a goddess. This was a goddess of Egypt, a goddess of childbirth and marriage and civilization, and everything nice, who promised salvation to all women and men who came to her faithfully. So basically in these religions, if times are tough in this life, don't worry. If you go through the rites of initiation, you join a community on earth, right, other believers, and you get salvation in the next. Okay, let's go here, little computer. Come on, help me out. Please, we don't need any technical difficulties. Okay, how about this one? Next. Here's the problem, no IT support at home, so, okay, next. What happens if we escape, huh? Okay, I don't know why. The empire really had many different beliefs. Judaism was an important one among them, although it was really limited to the Eastern Mediterranean, right? The old kingdom of Israel, I should say really Judah and Israel, became the province of Judah. And this was a home to Jewish people who lived with a great deal of tolerance within the Roman Empire most of the time. Palestine is a Roman province, but some of them refused to worship the emperor as a god. There should be no gods before me, right? Says the Ten Commandments. So, you know, Orthodox or devout Jews aren't going to worship the emperor, even though the Romans didn't really care. Like, hey, you don't really have to worship the emperor, just pretend you do. It's kind of like, you know, if you're mad at the U.S. government, still put your flag out on the 4th of July just so your neighbors don't get mad at you, right? That type of thing. But many Jewish people said, no, there's no way. There's only one God, and that is Yahweh, and we're only going to follow Yahweh. Some of them refused to pay taxes. Now, if you recall from other empires, tolerant empires ask that you follow the laws and pay your taxes, right? You can have your religion, but don't cause trouble. Well, to the Roman authorities, these more devout Jews seem to be causing problems. And there was a lot of political discontent. So many Jews were unhappy within the Roman Empire. Among many of them, there was a longing for a Messiah, a political figure who's going to save us from Rome, who's going to deliver us from Roman rule. Many of them were zealous, right? In fact, we get the word zealous from the zealots, who believed in this political Messiah, that someone, a savior, is going to destroy Rome and lead the Jewish people into an era of freedom. In some other Jewish people, there were different sects within Judaism. The Essenes thought that the end of the world is coming. Like, it's the end of the world, just prepare, right? Go buy all the toilet paper at Walmart and wait for the end. No, just kidding. Shouldn't be joking about COVID-19, should we? Into this political context, Jesus of Nazareth was most likely born, okay? We don't have the birth certificate, as we did not have the birth certificate for Confucius or the Buddha or Zoroaster or Lao Tzu or others, okay? So what we know about the early life of Jesus comes to us from Christians. And they weren't writing to be objective, right? They weren't trying to create the New York Times. They were trying to get other people to believe. So you need to be careful with early Christian sources as historians. That doesn't mean that you shouldn't believe what you believe, right? I mean, for religious people, they're going to believe those sources. Historians, it's our job to look at things a little more critically. But historians would say probably Jesus of Nazareth did live. Whether Jesus was the Son of God or not is not an historical question. It's a religious one. Rather awkwardly, we think Jesus was born around 4 BCE. That's okay, 4 years before Christ. That's a problem when the calendar was put together in the 6th century. Probably lived for about 30 years. And by all accounts, taught peace. Right? Did not teach any type of political rebellion. Did not teach, like, take up arms and let's fight the Roman centurions, which would have been just suicidal, right? But said, look, the war is not between Rome and the Jewish people. The war is inside ourselves. Okay? The war is to do good. The war is to avoid temptation. So he taught about an internal transformation, an internal revolution. Okay? 2 things mainly that Jesus taught. God is the source of love, and human beings have the free will to accept that love, but if they do, there's a responsibility to put it into action on earth, especially for the least fortunate. The poor, the hungry, the sick. Radically, people in prison needed to be loved, right? This is a radical message. So active love comes from God, and individuals have the free will, the choice to accept that love. And if they do, they have to put it into action on earth. Okay? So there's a real moral code here. There's a duty to act. Unlike some of the other faiths we've talked about thus far, there's not really a withdrawal, not really a retreat to avoid suffering. It's a responsibility to act against suffering, to ease suffering. And Jesus had large followings, great healings. I'm being attacked by my dog. Okay, I'm sorry. Of course, in an era before medical care, any reputed healings are going to gain a large following. Romans feared this message. Here's a poor guy appealing to poor people, right? Who's this socialist, right? Let's get rid of him, basically. Right? So, community leaders, especially within the Jewish community, didn't accept the message of Jesus either. Like, who is this guy? Some carpenter, making these new laws, saying things like, well, it's okay to heal people on the Sabbath, when Mosaic law said, no, you can't do anything on the Sabbath. You can't work on the Sabbath. Okay? Roman leaders put Jesus to death by crucifixion, which is essentially hanging from the wrist. Hanging from the wrist long enough will result in suffocation. So this is a very painful way to die, very tragic. He was supposedly killed with executed. Right, this is a capital punishment, death by the state for a crime. The crime of what? Leading, causing a rebellion or potentially a rebellion. Executed with other criminals, okay? With criminals. His followers are distraught. Okay? Some had come to see Jesus as the Messiah, but now he's dead. Okay? He died a very painful, humiliating death. We would say that he was probably nailed through the wrist and pulled up on a scaffold instead of, I know it's more symbolic to carry a cross, but essentially they would nail people to a board and pull that board up on a pulley on a scaffold for public execution. 3 days later, however, we are told in 2 different accounts in the New Testament, right, we're dealing with the New Testament of the Christian Bible, that Jesus appeared to women, yes, women followers who came to the men, and the men said, "Oh, you're crazy, you're just women. Jesus did not appear to you, go back and do whatever you're supposed to be doing." But followers finally came to believe once Jesus appeared to them, even doubting Thomas eventually, right, that Jesus was resurrected, would come back from the dead. And they argue that, they would say that he walked the earth for 40 days before he was lifted into heaven. Thereafter, they found him to be the Messiah. Messiah means the anointed one, the messenger of God, the most intrepid, walking around, and prolific, which means writing, follower of Jesus was someone who never met Jesus, at least in the flesh. Saul of Tarsus, hereafter known as Paul, was a Jewish Pharisee. This is someone who's going to stamp out the heresies, right? Stop people from believing errors. Supposedly on the road from Damascus, he falls off his horse, he loses his sight, he's blinded, he hears a voice saying, "Why are you persecuting me?" He converts to Christianity, and instead of persecuting with the sword, becomes very prolific with the pen or the quill, and writes letters to the communities all over the Roman Empire as this faith begins to spread. So much of the Christian New Testament is actually letters written by the followers of Jesus, or sort of say the followers of Jesus, including Paul, who writes letters to the Corinthians, the Romans, the Ephesians, and other people living in these towns, right? How they should how they should establish their Christian church. And look, you sort of say Paul was a product of his time, right? Paul was a product of a very patriarchal Roman society, so he might say things like, women have to sit in the back and should be quiet, okay? But that was Paul writing 2,000 years ago, okay? And 2,000 years ago, it was an opportune time. Paul was a Roman citizen. He could take to the Roman roads. He was arrested. He could argue under Roman law for his innocence. It's an opportune time because Rome is at peace. Remember, we're within the Pax Romana. It's the year what? It's the year the 30 of the Common Era, 35 of the Common Era, right? Pax Romana. So it's an opportune time to kind of plant the seeds of a religion, and when things all go to hell, so to speak, after the year 180, those seedlings are strong enough to give comfort to people during very, very dark times, in what we call the crisis of the 3rd century. This image here, a bit of an anachronism. This is the famous all one piece of marble carving by Michelangelo, who did this in the 16th century. So that's about 500 years ago. This is not a Roman statue of 2,000 years old, okay? But it is a very beautiful piece that sits in the Vatican in Rome today, right? Of the mother of Jesus cradling her dead son. An early image of Jesus would look more like this, okay? A shepherd, okay? He's carrying a lamb on his shoulders, right? In the early Christian church, there was a great deal of diversity. Was Jesus God? Yes. Was Jesus man? Yes. Was Jesus something in between? Yes. What's the answer? Well, it depended on your community. Can women speak? Yes. Can women speak? No. It depended on the community. So in the early Christian church, there was a lot of diversity. Think of the bottom of an hourglass, right? In time, there's going to be more conformity, the middle of the hourglass, and then today, great diversity again. But that middle section, okay, is going to be conformity really imposed by the Roman Catholic Church for about 1,000 years, from about 500 to about 1,500 of the Common Era. These early communities, before 500, appealed to the poor. Like, blessed are the poor, right? The Sermon on the Mount. Poor people are comforted by this message, and so are women. Women were argued to be equal to the eyes of men, equal. Cut, let's take 2. Women were argued by Jesus to be equal to men in the eyes of God. And there are episodes in the Bible that someone might read today and flip the page like this is boring stuff. But there's not that I'm an expert on the Bible by any means, but there's a scene where Martha and Mary, not Mary's mother, but a different Mary, kind of have the men over. I'm kind of thinking this like Super Bowl Sunday, and Martha's in the kitchen making up the food, and Mary's sitting with the men in the living room, And Martha yells at her sister, hey, get in here. We're a woman. We should be making food for the men. Instead, she's sitting with the men, talking as an equal about philosophy. And Jesus supposedly says, hey, she's found what is important and it will not be taken from them. So something you might read today like, whatever. Sounds like a Sunday NFL day in my family. No, this is very radical, that a woman is sitting as an equal with men 2,000 years ago. Okay? So it appealed to women. Helping one another was an important message. The Christianity promised community, belonging in this world, and salvation in the next. The Roman Church, the Catholic Church, took on structure as Rome began to decline. So if you were a young man, again, this is a patriarchal society, and the Roman government is falling apart, why would I take a job in the Roman government? There's this new thing called the church that offers a lot more. So young men are increasingly attracted to the Roman church, and it takes on structure. In fact, it borrows a lot of the structure, the kind of chain of command from the Roman Empire. So if you think about the Roman Empire, who's the head of the Roman Empire? Well, the emperor who sits in Rome. The head of the Roman Church, the Catholic Church, will be Il Pape, right? The father, the Pope, the Bishop of Rome, who sits in Rome. And you have all of these kind of districts, the Romans would have districts. The Catholic Church would have parishes at the local level, okay, and bishop districts at a wider level. So it takes on structure, especially as the government declined. And it began to establish more authoritative texts. So what is the Bible? Is this thing written by Thomas part of the Bible? No, we don't think. This thing that's supposedly written by Mary part of the Bible? No. They collect, who's they? The church officials collect what they feel were the authentic Gospels, the message of Jesus and the letters of the disciples, and put it into the New Testament. So a lot was not included. You can look up some of this stuff. It still exists. It's just not included in the Bible. It's not seen as authoritative. Okay? Shifting from Rome to Roman economy and society, yes, during the Pax Romana, Rome is all one free trade zone, no internal taxes, integrated economy with the same currency. There's trade, there's urbanization, there's commercial agriculture. Still these huge latifundia. These were these huge estates owned by the wealthy. The city of Rome grows to be the first city ever with over 1 million people. The Romans actually invent concrete, which helped them to build this beautiful city filled with fountains. They had to bring water in from afar, from mountaintops. They had not invented mechanical pumps at this time, but they built water bridges, right? Bridges that bring water from the mountains into the city and use gravity pressure to make these beautiful fountains. Colosseum, so for the gladiatorial games, it wasn't just feeding Christians to lions and stuff, right? Persecution of Christians was actually on again, off again. If persecution was nonstop, man, there would have been no Christians left. So it was on again, off again.